This is the Slots and Sockets Podcast, episode number 9. I am your host, IRD Moose, and your other host,
Turbo Penguin.
And we're going to jump right into the stories today with Nvidia kind of leaking a TBP of 600 watts on the 5090. That sounds like melty land for their power connectors.
Yes, so 5090. So I think the 8800 XT sort of I don't know if it caught them off guard. I think maybe moved up their quote unquote paper launch a little bit early.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting is that a lot of the leaks are talking about the 5080. Now, what's interesting is a lot of the things we've been hearing was 5090 wasn't ready until late this year, and that 5080 would be coming first quarter of next year. We're hearing that yields haven't been amazing, and you know that's not uncommon, especially depending on what we've got from a yield perspective. We always kind of knew that the 5090 would be a low yield. It's going to be the hardest one to skew out when you do your wafers and to cut them up.
Right.
And typically speaking, you'll start doing your wafers and 30% will be high skews, and the others that don't qualify for a 5090, hopefully you can do as a cut down version of 5080 or a 70 or a 60.
That's
something along those lines. Yeah. And so the notion is that you start binning these things up, and you're doing your releases, and you start making the 5090s, and you start putting aside 5080 parts and 5070 parts. And hopefully out of that one wafer, you're able to get, use 80-90% of that wafer, whether that's a 90 part, an 80 or a 70, or kind of go down. And that works with GPUs, that works with CPUs. But what's interesting is that before the 8800 XT, the things we were hearing were the yields on the 90 parts were being stubborn. And
which can happen. We can
absolutely.
usually, we can get yields on the high end parts a lot lower than normal.
Yeah, I mean that's part of it is like, and that makes it, as you get more and more complex and higher, more sophisticated, it makes sense that you're going to have fewer pieces that qualify for those high skews. I mean, Intel, AMD deal with this, anytime, TSMC is making these things, anytime they're making things where it's tiered like this, the goal is to try to use as much of the wafer, because again, money is production. So if I'm going to make a wafer, I want to be able to use as much of that as I can. And that's why oftentimes you'll see things show up and you're like, that was nowhere near what anyone was talking about. Like, a 3050, or sometimes what they'll do is they'll take laptop parts or desktop parts and flip them the other way, is because they have a yield. Like for instance, the 5600 X3D, that was 3D parts that were supposed to be 5800 X3Ds, failed as a 58, but they said, hey, these actually could pass as 56s. They had enough of them that rather than throwing away, they're like, let's change the 8 to a 6 and still those.
And that became the first Micro Center deal too.
And that became the first Micro Center deal. So the 5090s are being, from what we're hearing, problematic in the yields. And then the other thing that to keep in is a lot of things we're hearing is 600 watts, but we're not hearing if that's necessarily power used or if that's thermal.
Right.
Okay. It would make sense if it's thermal, how much watt you could pull off, but it wouldn't put Nvidia to put a bunch of power through. I mean, let's be honest, the 4090 used a lot of power.
You could get it up to 600 watts.
If this is going to push 600 watts, there's a good question is, will the 12 volt, a single allow enough to do that plus some overclocking. And you know,
I don't think
part
it
of
will.
me, I don't think so. And I think hopefully Nvidia has learned that melting connectors is bad. Um, because and if it really is a single and it's really pulling 600 watts, I really hope people like start questioning that ability for a single cable to do
Yeah.
that.
Well,
Hopefully, go ahead.
one of the big issues with the 12 volt high power is the maximum power rating available is 600 watts. That connector is not rated for anything above that. So they're basically capping out that the people that are going to buy this card are going to be either the workstation people who don't want to spend for a quadro, or the crazy go nuts overclockers who slap an LN2 pod on it and pull 600 watts through that single power connector. And the problem is that you can't go above the 600 watts without risking that connector melting, which we were already seeing when the cards were rated 150 watts lower. So you technically had that margin, but it's gone now. And that's kind of where the old PCI Express connector is better, because the connector is rated at 150 watts for power delivery, but the safety margin is another 75 watts on top of that. You can pull 225 watts technically safely from a standard PCI Express connector.
What I don't understand is, well, we are having these issues. Why we didn't see graphics card manufacturers go out and be like, we're going to put this on too. Like,
Yeah. I bet the board partners are going to do that if there's room in the
let's.
design.
It's my understanding that in the early designs of 4090, EVGA Kingpin were two 12-volt high power connectors.
Yeah.
And why I don't understand why they didn't do that, I still to this day don't quite understand. I get that, if you're trying to pull 600 watts, that means that you've got to have of the old pins, what, three, four, be technically four with a lot of overhead.
Yeah.
But I get, and that's a lot of power. You might as well, at that point, you're giving your graphics card a 24 pin motherboard connector, basically.
Toss it to
Um,
full ATX. Yeah.
I mean, seriously, and I think hopefully somewhere along the lines, Nvidia has got to be moving this away from let's just put more power into we need some efficiency.
Yeah.
And it feels like, from what we're hearing, 4090 was let's cram as much power down this thing as we can. And it seems like 5090 is the same.
Yep.
And if we continue to have melty cards, I don't know. I mean, as expensive as that card is, I
It
would be
doesn't,
really
yeah.
hacked off if that stupid thing burned.
It doesn't make sense. And yeah, I think to your point, they're playing the same game that Intel played with the 13th and 14th gen. Well, let's just throw more power at it and let it go nuts. And I mean,
Let me rephrase
if
that.
that is what they're doing.
I don't think either of us are saying that Nvidia is doing the same thing and
Right.
just carelessly just let's make something that's faster that we know won't work.
Right.
I think that their solution is we've got a good design here, and if we add more power, we can do that safely, and our graphics cards can actually take 600 watts and they perform faster. So it'll be interesting to see. The next probably, I, could we see a paper launch? By the way, no one's expecting here's a 5090, and oh, by the way, here's a stack of 20,000 of them. Who wants
Mm-hmm.
one?
Right.
I think it's here it is, and oh, by the way, it's gonna release a month, 4-6 weeks, and availability will be scarce at the beginning.
Yeah,
Um,
I think they're trying. I think really what they're doing is a paper launch to try and get ahead of the 8800. Because
the loaded question I think will be: will they be able to get review samples out before, or um, around the same time that you're starting to have 8800 XT, because
Yep.
I think the only way Nvidia can really spin this is if they come out and say, yeah, the 8800 XT and it's 48 performance, but look at this performance. It's going to cost, $22,000 for a 5090, but it's three times as fast as that, or two times as fast, or
Yep.
whatever that multiplier is. And so I think it's just different views of how they want to sell. AMD wants to be in the budget and performance value performance, and Nvidia wants to own the crown,
Yep.
and that's fine. But you know you're not going to get a lot of sales, and maybe they're making a crap ton of money for every 5090 they're going to sell. But for every 15090, I think the expectation is you're going to have 50 8800 XT sales,
Hmm.
and they're I would assume that the 8800 XT piece is going to be wildly more profitable at those sales numbers, and I don't think Nvidia has the volume to do that with this. And in all honesty, circling back to 8800 XT, the early things that we're hearing through the channels is that 8800 XT is yielding very surprisingly well.
Hmm.
Um, Again, that's TSMC, so no surprise. They've got a really good node, and um, it's just worked out. Sometimes you get great yields, and sometimes your yields aren't great. Hopefully, your yields are good, because that means the better your yields are, the more money you can make.
Yep. And then, with AMD playing the middle, they're going to need those bulk cards to play the Walmart game of stack it deep and sell it cheap. And that's how you get to the top of the game.
I think so. I think AMD is sitting there saying, we're just going to sell a crap ton of them. They're
Yeah.
going to be great. I'm not saying they're going to be bad. I think they're going to be legitimately really good. And I'm more excited about that than any 5090, 5080, 5070 that's going to come out, because I really think that NVIDIA is going to be full of themselves when it comes to pricing, and we'll see. The
Yeah.
real question is what will NVIDIA try to sell these at?
Yeah.
And I really think that that's going to be the big topic. But speaking of topics,
Yep.
let's move on to our next topic.
All right. So Intel has announced the 200V, or as we've come to call it, the 200 voltage parts, and they're supposed to ship in laptops later this month. So a little bit of good news coming there.
We know that the Strix has moved a lot of pieces from AMD side. We know that they've shipped a lot of those to board partners, so we're expecting to see some fairly good what's the word, healthy competition.
Mhm.
I think Intel needs this to be a very good launch. This will to be telling to see how the negative press from the desktop parts um, impacts sales.
Yeah.
If the voltage parts don't sell well, I believe that's probably because, well, two things. We know that the voltage parts, the Lunar Lake, is on a more expensive process than Hawk Point. Um, so we're expecting to see that to be more expensive.
Hmm.
Um, or AMD is going to be taking either less or maybe losses. I don't think they have the ability to take a loss. I think they have to make money. So it'll be interesting to see what and how that sells. But um, don't be surprised with some of these board partners if you start seeing a real push for AMD processors.
Yeah.
Um,
Especially in the gaming
and
segment.
speaking of that, I know this isn't on our list. This is an AMD topic, but 7800M has seen a couple of Geekbench leaks,
Ooh.
and that looks like a 4070 laptop part. Actually, maybe a little bit quicker. So that could be a very interesting thing, especially as more system integrators and systems builders are putting together some of these AMD systems. The notion that you could do Radeon with Radeon looks AMD with Radeon looks very good, and I'm gonna guess that that's gonna be a more economical piece than the 4070 or whatever 5000 series parts. But the real question when it comes to laptops, and I think this is, maybe turning, is do they sell? Because the notion, what we've been hearing is that basically, it's almost impossible to find Intel Arc gaming laptops because basically the system manufacturer's like, yeah, I'll make Arc if I don't want to sell laptops.
Yep.
Just people aren't buying them.
Yeah.
So we'll see. The loaded question here on this 2000 voltage series is going to be how well does it sell, or how well doesn't it sell? And
Yeah.
I think for Intel, the best case scenario is a lukewarm launch. If sales numbers are bad, that's really, really bad for Intel.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
we'll see. They're interesting parts. I don't think anyone's super excited. I think it's more of the same.
I mean, I would love to see a huge comeback story of Intel knocking it out of the park and, they do things right for a change, but I don't think we're going to see that anytime soon. And following on that, the Panther Lake 16 core information leaked. Now, keep in mind, this is Intel 16 core. So it's not really 16 core. This is a 4P core, 4 economy core, and 4 LP economy core part.
That's
so
12.
It's is that 12? I did the
Is
math wrong.
is it hyper? No, is it hyper threading?
No,
On
it
the
is
P
hyper
cores and
threaded.
E cores?
I apologize.
So
You're right. It is hyper threaded.
so you have
So the
8
P
hyper
cores,
threading.
yeah, yeah, and this to me just kind of looks like a paper tiger. It just why why is this a thing? Why are we stacking a mobile phone on top of a CPU that just needs more actual cores? But moving on.
It just seems like and like we know that there's been some cancellations.
Yeah.
I look, it comes to Intel, I think we're going to see more cancellations and more. I don't know. Like we know Beast Lake was canceled. I
Mm-hmm.
think we're going to have some things canceled and pushed back.
We
When
might
you
see
push
Panther
something
Lake
back,
canceled. Yeah.
we could. When you push some things back, you've got to sit there and say, okay, my product line, how does it go? And what's my competition? What's AMD doing? Because eventually AMD is going to have to kind of step away from AM5, and you know, uh, yeah. But speaking
Yeah.
of AM5, because that leads us really well into 9600X and 9700X. The we saw MSI come out with the 105-watt board.
Mm-hmm.
Is the motherboard option
With the
allows it
BIOS, yeah.
basically, yeah, basically the BIOS allows it to run at higher wattage. Um, More board partners are doing this, and it comes to that this is an AMD approved thing. This is probably where these parts should have been just launched as recommended.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, it's going to be a BIOS piece that you're going to have to go into, enable it to get this benefit, but you're going to see a good chunk of performance there just with enabling the higher power. It's going to not be as efficient, but I think most people who are listening or care are going to realize that I don't really care if in my desktop is power efficient.
Yeah.
Unless you're running this on batteries, who cares?
Yeah. Throw all the watts at it. Because, I mean, as long as you're not burning up the CPU like a certain other competitor, um, you know, I, why not?
Well,
Why not put high
I
wattage parts in?
the one thing that keeps coming back to me when we talk about Zen 5 is, let's be honest, they were comparing this to 14900K and 13900K. Okay, I get it. Guys, Intel's using like 400 watts to do what they're doing with 75 and 80 watts.
Yeah.
Like, even at 105, which is a boost, a good chunk increase.
Yeah.
AMD is cleaning the clocks because, if you look at the power
No pun
efficiency,
intended, right?
yeah, but um, when you look at the power efficiency, you realize very quickly, holy crap, like these Intel parts are ridiculously power hungry,
Mm-hmm.
and they will. I mean, what could AMD do if I let them use 400 watts? Holy crap!
Right.
At this point, we could have four 9600Xs overclocked, and you'd just be barely over that.
Yep.
You know, so that's a good thing. If you have one of those, if you're an early adopter, you'll hopefully be realizing that that's a smart thing. I think the loaded question will be like system integrators, like you know Dell, HP, some of these other, like maybe a Falcon Northwest, maybe the more boutique. Are they going to enable this out of the box? This is an AMD supported function
Mm-hmm.
through Aegis. It's just, you just gotta click the switch and it's good. Um, would we see somebody like an HP? I mean, Dell won't, because Dell doesn't like AMD.
Right.
Um, but would HP sell you a desktop part with a 9600X that allows it to go to 105
I
watts?
don't think HP would, but somebody like Falcon Northwest or Origin PC, where they use off the shelf components, they typically use higher end coolers and stuff like that. I think they will probably end up doing the 105-watt patch. Um, because, I mean, they're shipping an out of the box board. It's like a Asus board or, MSI board that you can get off the shelf. HP, because they do custom board designs, custom BIOSes, everything's custom. The odds are I don't think we're going to see them do that, at least with the stuff that's already shipped. More than likely, what I think they would do is ship a new SKU for their boxes with AMD parts in them and ship those with 105-watt TDP, because knowing HP, they have a bad habit of undersizing their coolers anyway. And if they undersize it for a 65-watt part, and then all of a sudden you add another 50 watts to that, um, you're going to have a bad time. So, unless I'm wrong and they put actually decent coolers on their 9600 and 9700X power desktops, I don't think we're going to see that we're going to see that come out as far as the existing shipped hardware. It's going to be something new that comes down the line.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see how they do that. I know that AMD is wanting to pair 96, the 96 9700X parts with, a B650 and an 8800 XT and sell it as a bundle, especially in that integrator section. So
Mm-hmm.
I think we'll get some fairly attractive deals, especially given how AMD has been really good to give away free RAM. You get free RAM, everyone gets free RAM.
Right.
Um, so we could see some really attractive 8800 XP systems out of system integrators in that value segment. And given if we can turn on 105 watts, and given that the 8800 XT is where it is, I think you could see some really, really good value desktops coming out of that space. It just depends on what that price point is, because I mean, if you look at Micro Center, I mean, right now a 90, it used to be, it was $499 for motherboard, processor, RAM, 5800X3D, and I mean, I need to see what bundles they're selling right this second. Um, Let's see, PC parts. AMD bundles, 9600X motherboard, processor, RAM, 349. That's
That's
not
uh, that's a heck of a good
that's
price.
considering the 7700X with the same setup is 399. A
Interesting.
9700X is 499.
I mean, those all sound
449.
like reasonable prices to me. Definitely
Now,
good options.
7600X 3D, 449. That's the B650, 32 gigs of RAM.
See that one
Um,
that 7600 looks like such a deal right now just because it's an X3D part. It's a 7600 gets you in the realm where you could do a 9000 series. Later if you get a good bump, and since it's an X3D part, you're already going to have your OS set up to stay with an X3D part. So, you know, you could upgrade that thing overnight to the biggest, baddest consumer CPU you can get your hands on right now.
what's
And
interesting
that's
is
pretty
that
sweet.
the 7800X 3D actually bundle has gone up.
Interesting.
It used to be 499. That was the 7600X 3D, B650, and 32 gigs of RAM for 499. That is
Mm,
now sitting at 599. I think it has to, because otherwise, who would be buying? I mean, because if it's 499, where are you going to put the 7600X 3D?
right.
So I think that some of these things slotted that 8 up. I also think that there's a lot of people who now realize that 7600X 3D is kind of the, still the gaming king, and had it fallen down, lower to, I don't know, 449, that would make that like just such a good deal.
Yeah.
Plus, I think we're probably making space for the 9800X 3D coming later, so we'll see how that looks.
Yeah. And for our last story of the show, looks like Qualcomm released specs for their new Snapdragon X parts, but these aren't the fast ones. These aren't the cool ones that the three of you that bought the Snapdragon Elite came laptops recently. These are lower performance parts, and when you're talking about an elite class CPU that's kind of meh for most things, I are do you think these are going to sell at all? Like, you got to
No,
price them a lot cheaper.
no, but they're important.
I agree.
They're
Yeah.
important for two things. There are two people who are very keen at this. First, um, Microsoft is very keen to see this go. They put a lot of money, so that makes it why they're making more SKUs. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Two, Nvidia is absolutely watching this. They want to see this platform succeed, because they're at the point where they're going to make a processor. I don't think there's any doubt if they will. I think the question is if ARM can get off the ground and the support and the gaming can be kind of there, they will absolutely come and make an ARM GPU where it's all in one,
Yeah.
and it'll knock the socks off.
Well,
If
they did that with
ARM
Tegra.
doesn't, yeah, but if ARM doesn't, um, they're going to be forced with trying to find somebody to build an x86. And I think x86 is harder to build than ARM.
Yeah.
And so I think that they would prefer to see ARM over x86. So we'll see what that looks like.
Yeah. And
I don't think that
Apple's
that's
proven.
close, by the way. I don't think
Yeah.
we're talking 6 months. I don't think we're
No.
talking 25. I don't think we're really talking 26. Um, I really think that's a long-term game plan for Nvidia. I do not see them jumping in this. And plus, I really think it's going to take 3, 4, 5 years
Mhm.
for ARM to kind of get some of this kinked out where people don't think ARM and think crappy processor.
Yeah. Well, and that's the funny thing is even though Apple has been branding their processors Apple Silicon, it's still ARM. It's still ARM
It is.
based. And they've proven that ARM can do general compute well. The problem is that on the Microsoft side, there's not a whole lot of software for it, and Microsoft has been pushing ARM for 10 years, ever
It's the
since Windows
software.
8. Yeah,
It,
it's really software support,
you either have to make it for ARM or you have to have an emulator. But the
or yeah, a
problem is,
compatibility layer like Proton.
yeah, you have to, or if you build it the other way around, I make my thing for ARM and now I have to go the other way so it works on x86,
Yeah,
or I have to have two. And for software developers, like, it forces them to have to choose: do I do both? Do I do one? Do I do one and then try to emulate, but then I gotta make sure the emulation or the translation layer works. It does make it makes it harder. And I will say that when we're getting into um really more advanced gaming,
hmm
and you're getting into high performance, I believe that that's where I think it can get difficult on this. And I think developers, look, I think we're going to see Steam and Steam OS do probably, I think we'll see the Steam Deck and a Steam desktop for sure. But I'm on the fence on ARM from a desktop replacement. But I
yeah,
think the loaded question is, we've seen ARM on batteries, like a cell phone, on a tablet, on a laptop. You know, what could we do with ARM if I just plug it into the wall and give it more power?
yeah,
And it will be interesting to see what that looks like. So,
yeah, for sure.
one last thing, real quick, and I saw this and I just kind of had to laugh.
A bonus
So,
story.
bonus story: Acer is going to have Nitro gaming monitors with up to 600 refresh rate.
Wait, Acer makes monitors? I'm just
They make
kidding. I
monitors.
know they make monitors. They're not just a CD-ROM
Um,
company.
but I just kind of laughed because at 600 frames. So what are we going to be playing Counter Strike Source with a 4090 and a 59? I mean 58, 7800 X3D, so we can play Counter Strike Source at 600 refresh rate.
I mean, I don't think at that point it's necessarily a play for pure refresh rate. For me, I think it's more expanding the range where you could do variable refresh rate, because
I think.
the wider you can go, the finer you can divvy it up and make ends meet, basically.
See, what I'm hoping to see is a flashback to the past. I want Sony to come back and make the Trinitron X3D, you know,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it'll be like a 57-inch ultra wide CRT tube,
Oh
and I
dear
want
God.
this thing to weigh like 1,000 pounds, and you'll have to have a special stand for it, but it'll be super fast, and it'll be just everything that gaming used to be in 2001.
Well, I got a 32-inch flat screen Vega at my parents' house that I'd be happy to give you if you want to come pick it up. Good
You mail
luck.
it.
It's two
You
hundred pounds.
Yeah, you ship it and I'll take it.
Right, right,
Well,
right. Yeah, the check's in the mail.
well,
Um,
guys, appreciate it. We do enjoy it. So like,
yeah.
subscribe, hit the like button down below, subscribe, leave a comment. Um, we're gonna start doing shorter episodes, maybe twice a week, as we try to keep up with all the tech stuff. And we've already talked. We've got a couple of fun episodes planned, so we'll have a software night. I think maybe we should have software and game night. Maybe we should talk
Mm,
about some fun games. I like
yeah.
games. Um, and then the other thing that we're gonna do is get ready for Santa technology, Techno Santa. Ooh,
There you go.
Techno Santa. We're gonna have a buyer's guide coming for us tech nerds. So keep an eye out for that. Have a wonderful day, evening, whatever this is that you watch or listen.
Yep.
And Moose wants to
have fun storming the castle. Good night, everybody.
take care.